It's really good to be with you today. Before I say a prayer and begin my talk, I want to do two things. Some of you will know that I've not long been back in full-time ministry after a serious accident in January. So the first thing I want to do is to say how grateful I've been for your messages of kindness, concern, and for your prayers. It's been a long journey, and I've written some reflections on the diocesan website which may help you share the journey I've been making. I'll pass on details of how to find them through the office. And the second thing is to ask you a question. When did you last take a risk to challenge an injustice? Taking a risk that your standing or reputation might be damaged, that it might rebound on you or on others. Just give it a moment's thought, please, before I lead us in a prayer. Courageous God, you know that some of us have taken risks to challenge injustice, and some of us have seen injustice but let it go. Some have been injustices which have occurred in our workplaces, others in our families or friendship groups. Many are embedded in our society and still exist in your church. As we reflect on the story of Ruth, Naomi and Boaz, help us to hear your word for our day and age, and to follow the example we've seen in you, our triune God, through the life of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Today we heard read the third chapter of the book of Ruth, so we're now 3/4 of the way through her story. Except it is not just her story. 3 figures loom large, 2 women and 1 man. The latter is referred to as a man of substance in the book of Ruth. That's easily interpreted as a man of wealth. However, Boaz, the man, is much more than someone who has financial resources. Boaz is a man of integrity. Naomi is a woman of substance, despite being a widow whose husband has not only had an untimely death, but a woman who's also lost her 2 sons very prematurely. The second woman, as you'll know, is Ruth, Naomi's daughter-in-law, who's chosen to leave her own people in the region known as Moab as an act of total commitment to her mother-in-law, Naomi. This very act is one which reveals Ruth as a woman of substance, widowed early in her marriage and without children, but still with the possibility of marrying again, yet whose character leads her to take the risk of supporting Naomi and going to an unfamiliar territory and people as an act of trust, confidence and love. Substance, in the end, is all about character, about the virtues we see modelled in the choices a person makes, in the courage they show in the face of adversity, in the risks they will take for the sake of others. In the story of Ruth, and particularly in the chapter we heard read today, Naomi knowingly puts Ruth and Boaz in a place of risk. In the reading, we learned how Ruth was told to make herself as attractive and feminine as possible, to put on her best clothes and some sweet-smelling perfume. She was then to go to the place where Boaz was asleep, to uncover his feet, basically to show his legs, and to lie close by him. Waking up in the middle of the night and finding Ruth came as a bit of a shock. It's hardly surprising. And we read that he had retired to sleep after a good supper, washed down with some wine. In the darkness, he wanted to know who was there. Why wouldn't he? And Ruth responds by saying her name and that she is his servant. And then she invites him to spread his cloak over her. I very much hope that you're getting a feel for the atmosphere here and the kind of music that might be playing in the background if this scene were on a television programme after the 9 o'clock watershed. One of the difficulties preaching online is I've no idea whether you are now raising your eyebrows, chuckling or shocked. But this doesn't become a seamy sequence with a parental guidance ticket. though it could have become so, and that's really important for us to remember. One or other of them, had their characters been different, could have brought the other one into disrepute. Or if someone come in unexpectedly to the room and drawn their own conclusions about what kind of threshing floor this was. What Naomi encouraged her daughter-in-law to do relied on character, Ruth's and Boaz's. And Ruth's willingness to trust Naomi and follow her directions was based on what she knew of both Naomi's and Boaz's character. Boaz has been growing in the recognition of his responsibility towards Ruth, and indeed to Naomi. These vulnerable women are part of his wider family, and they require him to stand up and stand in for them. Exactly what that is will be told more fully in the fourth and final chapter of the story. But Boaz realizes he needs to become Ruth's guardian redeemer. He must put into practice an understanding which, for the people of God, is anchored in God's concern to protect the vulnerable and begins with the responsibilities of the wider family to those who, like Ruth and Naomi, find themselves in dangerous and precarious situations through circumstances completely beyond their control. The story of Ruth may seem quite alien to our ears, locked in a different world and culture. Yet good character, let's say noble character, is as important today as it has ever been. And care and concern for those who have fled their land because of food insecurity, the threat of molestation or violence, and seeking out relations who might help them rebuild their life in another country, all sound very modern. Having started with that question of challenging injustice in different settings, I want to draw to a close by referencing an aspect which I haven't picked up on yet, but again is very relevant today. The book of Ruth makes very clear she was a Moabite, a foreigner. For the people of Judah, Ruth was not one of them. Yet Ruth, as chapter 4 will reveal, becomes the grandmother of King David, not only one of the best-known kings of Israel, but the ancestor of Jesus through Joseph's line. The murder of George Floyd in the USA has raised awareness of racial injustices across our own nation. And only this week I heard from one of our clergy with a black and minority ethnic heritage how she's been subjected to horrendous and vitriolic attacks on social media whenever she raises issues which touch upon racial justice and discrimination. Friends, we need to become more aware of issues which our black and ethnic minority communities, including those in our churches and even our church leaders, have experienced far too often. It will involve risk, and sometimes we'll get things wrong. But we as Christ's ambassadors are called to call out injustice, to step up and to step out. The book of Ruth, in its quiet and subtle way, contains a vital challenge to demonstrate that we are people of substance and noble character. Recognizing, revealing and challenging racial injustice is a theme so significant for today. So let's take a moment of quiet for each one of us to ask for God's wisdom and strength in doing this where He has placed us. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Amen.